good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're signing in from today. I've got with me today James Cross, CEO of ePower Resources. James, how are you today?
Doing fine, Romeo. Thanks.
Awesome. Now, here's how today's going to work. What I'm going to do is run through just a number of questions I've got for James based on ePower's most recent news release. But then this is an interactive event, so do feel free to ask James questions during today's run. There's a chat button on the bottom right of your screen. You can ask questions at any time during today's event. We'll likely get to them, but in the off chance that we don't, I'll make sure that James gets the transcript of the event so you can get, and along with your email as well, so we can get back to you as quickly as possible. Only other piece of housekeeping, today's event is being recorded and will be available in your inbox, probably midday Eastern time. It'll also be available on Six's YouTube channel and also on events.six.com. But eager to get into the protein of today's event. So James, first off, fill us in. What should shareholders have an eye on based on your most recent news release?
Yeah, well, we've started our 2025 Phase 1 exploration program. The crews arrived in the field, I think it was the day before yesterday. And so the work's begun. And the objectives around the work they're outlined in the press release, but maybe I'll go over them quickly just to help everybody understand. The first one is to further explore the Graphy Santra area, which is a very unique area. And really, it's for the last few years, it's been my favorite target on the property. And one of the things that makes it very special is graphite is it's carbon-based. So it began as life forms like leaves and grass and dead insects and accumulated on a relatively flat surface over time, and ultimately metamorphic events using extreme heat and pressure turned that into carbon as graphite. And then you've got these, what start out as flat beds that sometimes move around because of the movement of the plates and stuff like that. So at Graphy Santra, we have a kind of unique situation. Once in a while, you can get lucky enough where you start out with that flat surface and it folds itself right in half. So imagine folding a sandwich in half and then compacting it together. So what you're doing is creating somewhat of a ball of concentrated graphitic rock. And also there we've got the combination of very high grades at surface, reported grades. And the target is about 2.3 kilometers north to south and maybe 1.2 west to east. So rather than just being one of those long, narrow structures, you've really got a plot of land that represents a serious target. Now, to the naked eye, the flake size distribution also looks very good. And again, we want a deposit skewed toward larger flake graphite rather than finer flake graphite, because ultimately a miner gets more money for large flake graphite. And it also has a character of mineralization that will help whoever ultimately mines this project, help them deal with waste a lot more effectively. So, and that's a finer point of the whole thing, but Graphy Santra has those four things going for it. The folded, character of the deposit and concentrated with high grades from surface and what appears with the naked eye to be great flake size. We're getting testing done to verify that right now, and it should be released really any day now, within a matter of days. And then you have that unique character of the mineralization that is going to help a miner ultimately deal with waste. The other objective of the program is at the northern claims, which we had never visited until last year. And it has a beautiful geophysical a signature on it. And but we'd never visited the property until then. So the crew went out there and with a device called a beat mat, which is like a plastic sled that a person pulls, walked really on the known conductors, which were detected from the air in a LiDAR survey. And one of the ways we find graphite is the conductivity in the ground. So they were able to find lots of, or 5 different target areas, significantly sized target areas that have high-grade graphite mineralization from the surface, or less than a meter from the surface. So that that sled will detect that conductivity if it's close to the surface, and you just scrape away that upper overburden. So that's what we're doing with phase one of the program.
Awesome. No, appreciate that. I think that's helpful context for the other questions I'm going to throw at you. So I know you touched on this, but I'd love if you could just lay it out for the folks in the room. What are the kind of key milestones and timeline that investors should expect for this year's exploration campaign? When do you anticipate beginning field work and releasing those initial results?
Yeah, well, on the southern part of the property, near the end of the last field season, we took 4 250 kilo-ish in size samples and bulk samples, and brought those to the lab for testing for two primary purposes. One is the flake size distribution of those, because again, to show that there's a preponderance of larger flake graphite in what we're scraping up from the surface. And also we're also testing for the ability of the graphite to be easily, or we're testing the ease of separation of the graphite from the rock. And those results should be published really any day now, in the next few days, I think. And that will help us determine exactly what we're going to do in phase two. So, we're going to announce the finish of the work program we do there. Results might take a little bit longer, but we're going to collect 3 more bulk samples, at least 3, from Graphy Santra, and then an additional bulk sample from the northern claims, and bring that for similar testing to what we're getting the results for in a few days from the 2024 program.
Great. One question just for clarity. That $200,000 funding, is it intended to achieve the specific proof of concept objectives for a larger financing round, or is it sufficient for the immediate exploration goals?
Well, it is sufficient for this year's exploration. Okay. So we had some flow through left over from last year. So that's what's being put to work in the field right now for phase one. And this second round of financing, the 150 plus 50, that will fund the phase two of the exploration. So what we're trying to do is keep the exploration program low cost and high impact. And low cost because right now, our stock price isn't very high. So if we do a big program, we're diluting a lot. So yeah, this will be sufficient. Now, of course, it is ultimately proof of concept for a much larger company that might want to come take this from us or option it from us and spend significantly more to develop a resource there and go into production ultimately.
Great. That actually ties into a question that's in the chat from Wesley, who asks, who are potential buyers of ePower? What are the groups that you anticipate might be looking at ePower in the future?
Yeah, well, the first one I would say is industrial players who, desperately need to have graphite for their manufacturing process. And because there's a problem, you're going to need 140% more graphite production in 2030 than we had in 2024. That's globally. And the U.S. recently was cut off from Chinese graphite. So, and China produces 75%. So there is a rush on trying to secure geopolitically reliable sources of graphite for Western industry. So top players there, would be large manufacturing groups who employ graphite in their production process, like the auto companies is one, defense-related companies is another, big manufacturers, because the problem for them isn't the cost of what they're going to pay to develop a project, but the cost of not having one to supply them, and their entire manufacturing base collapses. Also, we might see a situation where mining companies actually get back into graphite because they've been out of it for 70 years or something like that. So you might see like the Rio Tintos of the world go back into graphite and want to make money on it because they see this problem too. Those are the big ones. And then you also have the Glencore type companies who, want to control that element of the supply chain. So a few different potential possibilities out there.
Awesome. Now I want to kind of zoom out and talk about the district just for a second. I'm curious if you could just give me and the audience a bit of context on what the geological advantages of the Tetepisca district are and any infrastructure benefits that could theoretically accelerate ePower's development timeline.
Yeah, I guess the geological advantages are kind of simple. Those are high grades combined with good flake size distribution skewed toward the larger flake. You don't often see that really. When you see very high grades, you often see a flake size distribution more like amorphous graphite. So it's got that unique combination going for it. Now it's also located in an area you can drive right to. You could be in Baie-Comeau, Quebec, which is a port on the mouth of the St. Lawrence. You can wake up there and by lunchtime you've driven to the property, 3 hours, 15 minutes or something like that. And the forestry industry is very active here. So they've cut so many roads through the property. Without the forestry business, you might be in a place where no man has ever been before, but you can drive right to it. And also the hydroelectric power industry is big up here as well. About 50 Ks, maybe 60 Ks from the property, there's a huge dam called Daniel Johnson, or Manic 5, they call it, which really supplies New York City with power. So, and you also have the major highway 389, which goes up to the iron mines and passes, just a short distance from the property. And so you've got that unique combination of nobody lives around here, so they're not going to complain that you're making noise or anything, but the infrastructure is top class.
All right. No, that makes sense. Appreciate it. The other thing I want to talk about is just proximity to the port, that Baie-Comeau port. I'm curious, I assume it does, but I'm curious your perspective on how that positions ePower competitively in the graphite market for that battery sector demand particularly.
Yeah, well, if you find a good graphite deposit, you want it to be somewhere near your ultimate customer, especially being a bulk material. Like if we found graphite, in Baffin Island, way up in northern Canada, especially inland, it might not matter, just because it's going to be so hard to get it to the market. Now, Baie-Comeau being only a little over a 3-hour drive, and also being a major port quite far east in Quebec, makes it well positioned to serve both North America and Europe. Baie-Comeau is actually the place where for grain exports from the prairie provinces of Canada and the central U.S. goes on barges in the Great Lakes all the way to Baie-Comeau through the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River, unloads there, and then the grain is switched to ocean-going vessels to be exported to the rest of the world. So you're only a week sailing time from, say, Hamburg, Germany or something like that, and you have barge access to the interior of the U.S. and Canada.
Right.
And you also have road access to the rest of the continent and rail access. They actually have barges that carry rail cars across the river to the railroad, and then those can access the rest of the continent as well. So we're kind of really located a 3-hour drive from a major transportation node that serves all different modes of transport.
That's great. Now, zooming out and just talking about the future for a second, what needs to be accomplished at Tetepisca for ePower to advance towards a resource estimate, a preliminary economic study, and just what kind of timeline do you think we're looking at?
Yeah, well, with this property, we never intend to go into production ourselves.
Sure.
Now, if we were forced to do that by a partner who wanted us to do that, meaning a funding partner who would want us to do that, we would, but we're not intending to do that ourselves. Now, we could, we're in a strange situation. The market is tough. So anytime we do a financing, we dilute our shareholders.
Sure.
And, we could easily delineate a 43-101 resource on this property, and a big, globally significant one. We already know there's a lot of graphite here. So, imagine you're a person with a huge canvas sack filled with thousands of tiny little nails, and the bag is full. And someone says, well, you haven't counted them according to the standards laid out in National Instrument 43-101. We haven't, but we know there are a lot,
Sure.
So to do that, it would probably cost, we could probably tell somebody right now, give us 5.5 million Canadian dollars, and we'll get you 2 million tons of graphite in the ground, and the right graphite for your purposes, assuming their purpose fits with what we've got there.
Sure.
And also not 400 meters below the surface, from 0 to 100, easily accessed graphite. So I say $5 million, 2 million tons of contained graphite.
Great. No, I appreciate that. I think that's helpful. It's always good to just see where your head's at strategically. So I think that's useful for investors. One thing I wanted to ask is, you've already touched on it, but just as we get towards the end of today's event, I'd love if you could provide just specific details about this exploration activities planned for the summer's work program. It's going to include drilling, geosurveys, mapping, and what are those targets you're looking at?
Right. Well, again, Graphy Santra is, the first priority, then the northern claims for phase 1 of the program. Now, phase 2 will partially be dictated by the results we're waiting for right now. That should be within a matter of days. So we're not going to do, or at least we don't anticipate doing, any diamond drilling this year. Instead, because we're not looking for graphite so far below the surface, we're looking for surface to maximum 100 meters, but there's plenty around that looks like we could just drill down 10 meters or something like that with a man-portable drill and start to develop some tonnage in places where you can kick the graphite on the ground. You see it's high grade, and you could space out some drill holes with a simple man-portable drill. Now, would that be 43-101? I'm not sure, but it gives us a number we could show an industrial player. Like, we've already got this many tons here, and have reason to believe we can get you a lot more, but need funding to do that.
Great. No, I think that's a helpful view into what it looks like for the summer. There's one question from the chat from Graham that we haven't touched yet. He says, are you due for a Quebec exploration refund this year, and how much would it be?
Yeah, I don't think we have anything coming right now. If we do, it's small. Now, we are going to do we're going to deploy. When we deploy flow through capital, we don't normally get that refund.
Oh, I see.
Because it's already taken by investors. Now, we are putting some capital into the ground that may not have the Quebec tax credit taken by an investor. In other words, it might be an investor from BC or Ontario, and they don't need a Quebec tax credit. And then the company can get that tax credit. So at the moment, we don't really have anything significant coming, but we should have some of that coming. Now, it generally takes about 9 months to get. And
Sure.
And so it'll be, but it does help fund next year's program. And off the top of my head, I think for next year's program, we should have at least 50,000 of that, covered because of the money we're going to get from Quebec ultimately. And that's an estimate, but I think it's a pretty good one.
Gotta love Quebec, right?
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely. And when we deploy hard dollars in the ground, we do get that tax credit.
Sure.
Which is 30. I believe it's still 35%, given where we are. As long as you're in the Plan Nord area, which is above a certain parallel of latitude, and we are, you get 35% refund. And we've never failed to receive a penny we've claimed. The system actually works.
Hey, that's rare, rare in a jurisdiction. So that's good to hear. So while we close today, James, I'm just going to throw it to you for what are you most excited about from this year? What's keeping you up at night and pleased with ePower this year?
Yeah, well, I guess the macro picture around graphite is it's something we used to predict. We really got the company started in early 2019 on the assumption that there would be a graphite crunch globally, and especially in the West, as it really all comes from the East. And now we're there, and now we don't even have to look at graphite prices because Canadian projects, there really aren't any, except a few, and there's only one small producing mine which is very near depletion. So, a Canadian mine would not really have to compete with Chinese pricing because you're not trying to turn this into a highly profitable operation compared to China. Instead, what you're trying to do is make sure that it outweighs the cost of not being able to use your manufacturing base to make money or to defend yourself. And so it's changed over. Here's an analogy for you, which I've used before. Imagine you've got a $35 million fighter jet, and there's one screw that you need to fly that plane, or without it, you can't. And it normally costs $10, and you normally get it from China. Sure. But they've said no more, and we're using all our screws anyway. So now you can get it made in Canada for $150. What do? Great, 150 is fine. I'll take it. And so we've had a divergence of price. We have two graphite markets now, and we're here to cater. We are their manufacturing base of the West. We're their insurance policy against losing everything.
That's a pretty picture, so it makes sense to be excited. James, thank you so much. I think this is really great, helpful extra context from this most recent news release. Thanks, everyone, for joining and those who asked questions. If you think of the perfect question right after the event ends, as I often do, please do send it in. I'll make sure James gets it and gets back to you as soon as possible. But thanks, everyone, so much. Have a great morning or afternoon, depending on where you send in from.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, James.